Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and today we had the Campfire chat for Diablo 4's Season 8, which gave us a preview of what's coming next for the game. We finally found out who the teased old friend that's coming back is, and he's going to be sitting at the top of the revised boss ladder in the new season. We got some words on the team's updated philosophy on how they're going to be balancing the game. We got a peek at the new seasonal powers, which I think is pretty safe to say are the coolest seasonal powers yet. The PTR for Season 8, the test server, starts next Tuesday, runs for 1 week, and in this video I'll give a summary of everything we've learned from the Campfire chat and my preliminary thoughts on Season 8 so far. I'll also remind you folks to hit subscribe to be alerted when I release a new video. But before we move on, a word from this video's sponsor, Boot.dev. If you're interested in learning programming, either as a hobby or a profession, check this out. Boot.dev has gamified learning to code. They've literally built an online programming course into a programming RPG. You gain XP, you complete quests, you level up, you earn achievements, and you can rank on a global leaderboard. The folks at Boot.dev believe that the best way to learn to code is to ensure you're never bored. With this program, you'll learn the programming languages Python and Go at your own pace. You're going to learn back-end web development from start to finish in a way that feels like you're playing an RPG, and is designed to get you to write a ton of code, since they believe that practice is the most effective way to learn coding. And if you're ever having trouble with something, they have an AI bear wizard named Boots that can walk you through any issues. It'll ask you questions to help you understand rather than just give you the answer. But if you want a more human approach, Boot.dev also has an active Discord community where helpful folks are around to lend assistance. But if you're ever completely stuck or you just want to see how the instructor wrote their code, there are solutions available for every challenge on the site. So click the link in the description box and use my code Rhykker to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% off your first month or first year, depending on the subscription you choose. So first off, mid-season updates. The team is changing how they're approaching these going forward. In the past, maybe a month and a half into a season, we would see a pretty significant balance pass that would either buff or nerf or both different builds. It would bring up underperforming builds. It would maybe nerf some of the top performing builds. They've kind of changed the philosophy a little bit over time, maybe change it more to just buffing underperforming builds, because they realize that it feels bad when they nerf things mid-season because people have invested so much time into their build. And so what they realized was the way mid-season patches had become was basically they were putting a bunch of effort into a patch in the middle of a season that didn't really do anything for anyone because it was just kind of like small balance changes. It wasn't going to bring back people that left. It wasn't really doing anything for people that had already settled in on a particular build. So it sounds like their focus now is going to really be on like the first 2 weeks. The first week or two of a new season is when all the major balance changes are going to happen. And rather than have like a big mid-season balance patch, they'll just hold off for the next season and ensure that at the start of that next season, they really want to focus on the quality of the season launch being better. So we can expect within the first week or two of a season to see some rapid reaction to things that are possibly overpowered. Like they gave it as an example, Blood Wave, the Blood Wave Necro. Under this new philosophy, it would have been nerfed very fast. Similarly, things that are new to the game, new items, new builds that they tried to make that are underperforming, they are going to try to buff those rapidly as well. Basically, they want the balance changes to happen before people are done with the season. And they also want to make sure any nerfs that happen to extreme outlier builds are going to be before people invest too much of their time into them. And to clarify about those nerfs, we're talking about when you have like an S+++ build, they want to bring it down to S tier. S tier being like, these are the best builds of the game, right? So if you have these are the best builds of the game and then you have one build that's performing, 20 pit levels higher, well, that's an outlier and they're going to want to bring that down in line with the top, 5 or whatever builds of the game. I think this is a very good approach. I'm fully behind it. Next, the team spoke about the state of the game with Season 7. They acknowledged that one of the biggest pieces of feedback in Season 7 was the pace of the game. Things are very fast and they do seem to feel things are too fast. In particular, they showed some charts actually for the leveling 1 to 60. They seem to suggest that the pace of the game in Season 6 was really good. In Season 6, it took about 16 hours to get to level 60 on average. Of course, that's from the top blaster player to the weekend warrior. And in Season 7, it was 9 hours on average. They said that progression in Season 7 was way faster than they expected. They attributed that partially to the strength of the new powers, partially to the headhunts being so rewarding, the Witch Tide. And what they said was they don't want to nerf the seasonal powers. They want those to still feel powerful, but they do want to smooth out the, especially one to 25 experience. They want to slow that down. They basically said you blink and you're level 20. So far, I'm in favor of all of this. I feel the game was too fast, progression was too fast. Then they also addressed itemization, not just leveling progression, but item progression. They don't like that magic and rare items basically become obsolete 5 minutes into a fresh character because legendaries are dropping so plentifully. Within the first hour of playing, players are getting a legendary every 3 to 4 minutes. So it sounds like they don't want to change things once you're level 60, but they want, while leveling to 60, for blues and yellows to have a bigger role. To that end, they're changing blues so that they can now have up to 2 affixes and yellows can have up to 3 affixes. This concerns me a bit because I kind of feel like we had Loot 2.0, and now we're sort of walking back some of the changes in Loot 2.0. I don't know how I feel about this. They did say they're not changing after 60, so, you know, maybe it won't be an issue. The main problem with the blues and yellows was really the quantity of loot. It's just having so much trash to sift through. So as long as, I guess, you know, pre-Torment, maybe loot isn't dropping very plentifully, so it's not a big deal to look at those blues and those yellows, that would be fine. Similarly, I'm also maybe a little disappointed that they're not addressing the post-60, because I feel post-60 right now, loot is way too plentiful. Again, you know, we're not getting a loot filter. Current state Season 7 is kind of exhausting for me to play with just the sheer amount of useless stuff that drops, and you leave stuff on the floor on purpose, and then it gets mailed to your stash, and then your stash gets full. But something that they're changing that might positively impact this is they're basically reworking the Torment 4 difficulty. I've seen people suggest in the past, oh, like, you know, are you in favor of them adding a Torment 5? And my answer is no, because then what? In a year, then we add a Torment 6 and a 7 and an 8. When does it end? Then we're back at Diablo 3 with 20 Torment levels. And so what they're doing instead is they're making Torment 4 more challenging, which I'm very much more in favor of. They wanted Torment 4 to be aspirational, and they noticed that 50% of players were getting to Torment 4. They want 10% of players to be reaching Torment 4. Again, because Torment 4 does not offer anything more than the lower Torments. You just can do stuff more efficiently. So they want T4 to be that more aspirational difficulty where 10% of players are reaching that. So they're tuning up the difficulty. They also said that in Season 7, it only took 15 hours for players to reach Torment 4, which was twice as fast as in Season 6. I guess it took 30 hours in Season 6 to reach Torment 4. I personally found the progression pace of Season 6 was overall very good. So they're making a few changes, namely to pit scaling as well. The pit's going to be more challenging. First off, to unlock Torment 1, they're bringing it down where now you only need to do a pit level 10. Used to be a pit 20. And they're increasing the Torment pit level scaling by 20%. So this means that a pit tier 100 is going to be significantly more challenging now than it was before. I know this is going to be probably unpopular because I think a lot of people enjoyed that they can realistically reach pit 100 and therefore level up all of their glyphs. I don't feel particularly strongly about this, but I know that people were happy about being able to achieve a pit 100 and are probably going to complain about not being able to reach a pit 100 and therefore getting kind of blocked at their progression on their glyphs. Anyway, Torment 4 is going to be equivalent now to a pit tier 76, so it's going to be 11 pit levels higher than what you're experiencing now if you want to get an idea of how difficult Torment 4 will be in Season 8. And again, I'm in favor of this if we're not just going to get a nerf across the board to our character strength, which would be unpopular and unfun. I would rather see Torment 4 ramped up in difficulty. So, happy with that. Okay, as for the season theme, we're basically getting a boss ladder 2.0. They call them lair bosses. We're talking about the Varshan, the Greer, the Grigwar, the Zir, you know, all those guys. We're getting 3 new bosses, one of which will be the pinnacle boss, the new pinnacle boss, more challenging than Andariel and Duriel, and it is the old friend coming back from Diablo 3. It is Belial. And I have mixed feelings about this. Am I happy to see Belial? Yes. He was actually the most interesting boss added to a Diablo game at the time, mechanically. It was very unique to see something like that in an ARPG in the year 2012. Now, that said, it basically means we're not going to see Belial ever as a future expansion boss. So that's kind of what takes the piss out of it for me. Because I'd speculate, you know, over time with enough Diablo expansions, they could add back in all the great evils. But whatever. You know, that aside, cool. Belial, new fight. new mechanics. They're also revamping all the other boss fights to add new mechanics. They didn't get into details, but the fights should be more interesting. The other 2 new bosses are going to be Vessel of Hatred only. So if you don't have Vessel of Hatred, you cannot access the other 2 bosses, which are going to be Urivar, the mask guy from Vessel of Hatred, and the Harbinger of Hatred, aka Wolf Mephisto from Vessel of Hatred. So this diagram over here shows the new boss ladder. Urivar gets added in the Initiate Lair boss alongside Varshan, Grigor, Bisanias, and Lord Zir. Harbinger of Hatred will be a Greater Lair boss, and then Belial gets added on top, above, rather, Duriel and Andariel. So Belial is going to be the most challenging, but also the most rewarding, more so than Duriel and Andariel. Now, if you remember Belial in Diablo 3, he has 2 forms. He has his smaller form and then his massive form. And so we're going to have that as well in Season 8. Or, sorry, the boss changes are coming to the base game. They're being implemented in Season 8, but they are permanent additions to the game and also coming to the Eternal Realm. So there's 2 forms in which you're going to fight Belial. One is Baby Belial form, which will have a chance to spawn once you've defeated any other lair boss. So you defeat a lair boss, and then Baby Belial might spawn, and if you are able to kill him, you're basically going to get double the loot from that lair boss. And then eventually, of course, you can fight real Belial, Giga Belial himself, as a final pinnacle boss of the game. Now, they're also doing a massive quality of life sweep to how we access these bosses. First off, every boss will now just have 1 single material. You don't have to get like 2 different material types to access any one boss. Secondly, they're introducing Stygian stones, or bringing them back in the game. And Stygian stones can basically substitute any material you're missing. So let's say you want to do Andariel, it needs 4 pincushion dolls. If you got 3 and 1 Stygian stone, you can craft that Stygian stone into a pincushion doll and you're good to go. So basically, different activities in the game are going to give you the keys to the Initiate Lair bosses. The Initiate Lair bosses will give you keys to the Greater Lair bosses, as well as drop Stygian stones. And then to access Giga Belial, you are going to need to get keys that only drop from Baby Belial. Now, there's an entire new system about how these materials are being used, which completely disrupts how we play the game and how we've come to play the boss ladder with boss rotations. So it no longer costs any materials to fight the boss. The cost only comes once you have defeated the boss. You have to, every individual person needs to pay materials to open the reward chest to get loot. Defeating the boss gets you nothing, sir. Good day. You have to then open the chest to get your loot. So you can still trade materials to a friend. So if you want to, help a friend out, you can still give him, you can kill the boss for him and you can give him some of your materials so that he can get the loot. But this entire meta that we used to have of boss rotations where everyone takes turn summoning the boss, that is gone. Boss rotations sucked. This is a good change to remove those. Now, Giga Belial does not have a special drop table. Every boss basically has their own drop table, right? So if you're farming a specific unique, you go farm that specific boss, right? In the case of Giga Belial, when you open his chest, you get to pick any of the other boss's drop tables, and you're going to get like an enhanced version of that. So it's going to be, if you can handle Giga Belial, and you normally want to farm, let's say, Varshan for a certain item, you're better off doing Giga Belial because you're going to get overall either more loot or better loot, but within that drop table. They've also made a bunch of quality life changes, like now you can more easily see on the map where the different boss dungeons are, what bosses in that dungeon, what materials you need to summon it, what his drops are, and you can also now teleport straight to the dungeon. All the lair bosses overall should now be more challenging than they once were. The team alluded to certain surprises we'll have to see on PTR. Also, they said that there is a bonus for party play when you open one of those boss chests at the end. If you're in a party of 4, you are guaranteed 1 extra unique item, so presumably it's a chance that scales up. So maybe if you have 2 people, it's a 50% chance or something. Belial's Giga Chest also guarantees 1 Greater Affix item, and he's also a great source of getting Infernal Compasses. Again, so all of that was added to the base game. The Season 8 theme specifically is tied into the new boss ladder, or Belial specifically, and it introduces apparition incursions. So think of the Blood Maiden from Helltide, kind of randomly appearing in places in the world. There's always going to be one of these up at a certain time. You go there and you're going to, similar to Blood Maiden, you engage with this. It's an open world activity. There's going to be waves of enemies, and it's this fast-paced boss rush mode. There are 10 possible apparition bosses. They're going to be randomized. Ends with the final showdown against Belial. There's 3 bosses in total per event, and presumably defeating these baby Belials will also drop the material to go face the Giga Belial. That's a little unclear. But then the real showstopper for Season 8 is the seasonal powers. And before you roll your eyes and say, ugh, another borrowed power seasonal mechanic, right? These are the coolest ones yet from the preview that we've had. You are getting to borrow boss powers. It's just full on leading into the power of the bosses. So every, we're talking about Lilith, we're talking about Duriel, we're talking about even world bosses like Wandering Death. There's 24 new powers being added into the game. You collect these by killing any given boss. So the first time you kill the Wandering Death, you're going to collect his power. This isn't something that you got to farm repeatedly, right? It's a guaranteed kill on every boss that you do for the first time you kill it. Now, each of these boss powers can either be socketed in as your main power or as a modifier power. You can have in total 1 main power and 3 modifiers. So let's say you take Wandering Death's power. You can either socket it in as your main power, which is then going to give you that Giga Cold Beam that Wandering Death has whenever you are activating a channeled skill, or you can instead put it as a modifier, which is going to have some other effect. It seems these main powers all kind of trigger on different circumstances. Sometimes it'll be when you use your ultimate. Sometimes it'll be when you're using a channeled skill. Sometimes it'll be when you activate a core skill. So not only do I think it's a really cool idea to get to literally borrow a boss's power, these powers are also very visual. They are impactful. You can see them. This was kind of a complaint I think I had, or a criticism I had in Season 7 that or past powers in general, that it's like, okay, I have this power, but I don't really feel like I have this power. It's kind of like passively doing stuff. I don't really notice it. By making it these very flashy, active boss powers that we've come to see and face, right? We've learned how to dodge them. We've learned to recognize them. Now we get to manifest them. I think that's super cool. And similar to the witch powers, these can be leveled up as well. It's going to be easy to just swap these in, swap these out. They want us to experiment freely. Also, they recognize that some of the powers in past seasons did not scale well. Maybe they're good at low level, but eventually your build is so strong that the amount of damage or whatever contribution they're doing is insignificant, and so a lot of the powers become obsolete. Now they are making these powers scale with your Paragon level, so that as you are going up in Paragon, your power is also naturally scaling up. They basically want these powers to stay relevant throughout all stages of progression. So again, I think this is the best implementation so far of seasonal powers. The team then went on to discuss balance changes. Lots of changes come into every class. One thing they wanted to do was put a limit on ultimate scaling so that things can't quite get as out of control. Cough, blood wave. So ultimate scaling is now capped at 200% bonus damage. They also reiterated something that they were talking about last season, where they want to reduce incidental crowd control, where you're just playing the game and you're passively applying crowd controls. They want it to be that you push a button and you crowd control an enemy. Any crowd control that you apply is deliberate and specifically timed, as opposed to just popping off because of lucky hit and this and that. So they're reworking Fists of Fate to now give vulnerable damage instead. They're also doing a couple of renames to things. So currently, you have poison damage, and poison damage over time is called poisoning damage. You have fire damage, and fire damage over time is called burning damage. You have physical damage, and physical damage over time is called bleeding damage. And then you have shadow, cold, and lightning that didn't have any special name. So they're just giving a special name now too. Cold damage over time is called frostbite damage. Shadow damage over time is called corruption damage, and lightning damage over time is called shocking damage. It is just a change in the jargon, no change in mechanic. On a class-by-class basis for the Barbarian, they really wanted to focus in on the fantasy of the Barbarian doing these big bonks. There's been a lot of the Barbarian attacks, and then things happen because it summons other things. And players are feeling like, well, I don't feel like I'm really bonking myself. So they want to bring back the bonk, double swing, whirlwind, mighty throw, all getting lots of love. For the Druid, they addressed snapshotting. First off, they're just kind of opposed to snapshotting in general, but specifically with Cataclysm, it was problematic because with enough cooldown, you can cast a new Cataclysm while your existing Cataclysm is still up. And I guess as a step back, snapshotting is you line up certain buffs, you cast Cataclysm, and your Cataclysm throughout its duration benefits from all those buffs. That's intended. What was unintended is that if you cast a new Cataclysm while the current Cataclysm is active, it retains all those same buffs, even though you've not reapplied them. So they're killing that. This is good. Snapshotting is not intuitive gameplay. If you don't understand the mechanic of what's going on, you're going to be like, oh, sometimes I'm doing all the damage and sometimes I'm doing no damage. And that's just it's not a good state of the game. Particularly when you get into these really cheesy, horrible tactics of, okay, well, let me put on this piece of gear, this piece of gear, this piece of gear, change this, I snapshot, and then I swap my gear out and just keep playing and keep my Cataclysm going. As long as I don't, change anything in 2 minutes, I'm fine. It's really unhealthy gameplay. Stoneburst is getting some love for the Druid as well as a human form. We have the different helms for the different forms of wolf and bear. Now you have a human helm for more of a caster. For Necromancer, Bloodwave is getting a nerf, of course. They want to bring it to S tier, not S++. They felt that the unique item, Kesami's Legacy, is just way too powerful. That basically once you get this item, it's GG, it's over. And they don't want that. They want there to be a journey, not just an on and off switch. So they're going to be dialing down the power of that item. They're giving love to Bloodlance to make it better at single target. They're going to give some love to minions in the form of new uniques. New sword is going to make uniques apply Vampiric Curse. And then when you cast Army of the Dead, you consume your Vampiric Curse. So a little bit similar to, I guess, the Diablo 3 Army of the Dead build. They're also adding an aspect that makes your skeletons explode for big damage when they die, and it makes them basically die every 4 seconds. So you gotta constantly resummon them. I don't know how that's gonna actually play out. For rogues, trap rogues are getting big love. Poison trap, they really want to make a poison trap build viable. Now for sorcerer, they actually found that sorcerer's state in season 7 was kind of like an ideal balance place. There were no outlier builds for sorcerer, like a lot of other classes had these really strong outlier builds. So they don't want to just like slap a 30x multiplier on all the sorcerer builds right now. What they want to do is kind of improve synergy and interactions between different effects. Sorcerer's getting some love to ice shards, crackling energy, meteor, meteorites. They do want to bring the sorcerer up a bit in season 8, just to clarify. Similarly to the Spiritborn, didn't really have any OP builds. It was in a pretty decent balance state. They're giving some love to Rushing Claw and to Stormfeathers. This is actually a really cool Stormfeathers build where you're going to be like picking up Stormfeathers and building up this raging fire around you. And the more you pick up, the longer the fire lasts and the bigger it gets. That about covers all the major changes. PTR again launches next Tuesday, runs for 1 week. But for the first 2 days, there will be no PTR boost. They want to test the early game progression. 2 days into PTR, roughly, they're going to turn on the ability to boost your character. They also said we're going to see reference to something called a reliquary in the PTR. It's not going to be available yet. They're not going to give full details until later, but it's basically a revamped battle pass system. Similarly, they're going to have a full roadmap coming before the launch of Season 8 for us to look forward to see what else is coming this year for Diablo 4. During the Q&A, it was alluded to that having to redo waypoints and strongholds all the time is a, quote, pain in the ass, so it looks like the team might be looking at that in the future. Not a big priority, but it's on their mind. They confirmed that lair bosses will not have the resilience mechanic of the world bosses. They feel that that cheapens your power progression journey. They do want you to eventually be able to easily defeat these bosses and feel the difference between when you were first struggling against them to finally, bonking them. But overall, bosses will be much more challenging this coming season compared to how they were. They suggested that Lilith may become a lair boss in the future. And on the topic of endgame, leaderboards, and aspirational content, they said that this is top of their mind. They want to add more satisfying and more rewarding milestones. And they kind of said that a lot of the changes they're making in Season 8 will feel like it's at least partially addressing that, where more of the content will feel aspirational, and there's going to be more of a progression journey in there. I didn't love that answer. To clarify, I do like that they're doing all that, but I don't see that as the solution to the desire for, leaderboards and aspirational content and more endgame stuff. Oh, and in the patch notes, we see an awesome new quality of life feature. Coming back from Diablo 3, players in a party can now instantly teleport to other members of the party through the social menu. Thank goodness. And so that's it, folks. That was the Campfire chat. Season 8, looking promising. I'm most excited about those new powers. We're going to be testing them out next week, but I turn the question to you folks. Are you excited for Season 8? Does this sound like something you'd want to skip? Why not? Sound off in the comments. And in case you missed it, folks, do be sure to check out my video on my predictions for Expansion 2. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.